A woman clinically dead for 4 minutes wakes up in a hospital bed. She describes a tunnel, a warm light at the end, a feeling of overwhelming peace. She was raised Christian. Halfway across the world, a man in Thailand survives a near-fatal car crash. He describes almost the exact same thing: a tunnel, a light, peace. He's Buddhist. He's never met the woman. He's never even heard her story. How is that possible? Every major religion tells people something different about what happens after death. Heaven, reincarnation, nothing at all.
And yet, when people actually come close to dying and survive to tell us about it, their stories sound strangely similar, almost identical, no matter where they're from or what they believe. Scientists have a name for this: near-death experience, NDE for short. And for decades, researchers have been trying to figure out one question. Is this the brain glimpsing something real? Or is this just the brain doing what brains do when they start to shut down? Let's start with what people actually report, because the pattern is remarkably consistent. A sense of leaving the body and looking down at it from above, moving through a tunnel toward a light.
A feeling of profound calm, even though the body is dying. Meeting deceased relatives or some kind of being made of light. And a rapid replay of memories, often called a life review. Survivors often describe it not just as watching their life back, but reliving it, feeling the emotional impact of their own actions on other people, sometimes described as more instructive than any lesson they ever learned while alive. Cardiologist Pim van Lommel studied over 300 cardiac arrest patients in the Netherlands, published in The Lancet, one of the most respected medical journals in the world. He found that roughly 18% of patients who survived clinical death reported some version of this experience. 18%. Not one or two outliers. A meaningful chunk of people describing something remarkably similar, despite different ages, different backgrounds, different beliefs about what happens after death. It's not just Christians and Buddhists either. Hindu patients describe being led by a messenger, sometimes even mistaken for someone else and sent back. Secular, non-religious survivors report the exact same tunnel, the exact same light, despite having no religious framework to expect it at all. That detail matters more than it seems. If near-death experiences were purely cultural, shaped entirely by what a person was taught to expect, atheists shouldn't be having them. But they do. Constantly. So what's actually happening inside a dying?
In 2013, neuroscientist Jimo Borjajan ran an experiment on rats. She recorded their brain activity in the seconds after cardiac arrest. She expected the brain to go quiet, the way a machine shuts down when the power cuts. Instead, she found the opposite: a massive surge of gamma wave activity, the same brainwaves associated with heightened consciousness and vivid perception. In 2023, her team found the same surge in dying human patients. In other words, the dying brain isn't fading out quietly. In its final moments, it may be doing the opposite, lighting up more than it does in ordinary waking life.
That could explain why near-death experiences feel so real, so vivid, more real than real, as many survivors describe it. If the brain is producing a final burst of heightened activity, that burst has to go somewhere. It has to be interpreted as something. There's another study that pushes this even further. Physician Sam Parnia led a project called AWARE across multiple hospitals, studying patients who went into cardiac arrest during CPR. His team placed hidden images on high shelves in resuscitation rooms, visible only from near the ceiling. The idea? If patients really were floating above their bodies during resuscitation, as many claim, some of them should be able to describe those hidden images afterward.
Most patients who survived didn't recall anything at all,
but a small number described events during their resuscitation with details that lined up with what actually happened in the room, at a point when their brain, by every standard measure, should not have been capable of forming memories at all. Parnia doesn't claim this proves an afterlife, but he argues it complicates the simple explanation that this is all just a dying brain misfiring at random. Neurologist Kevin Nelson has another piece of the puzzle. He studied people who report near-death experiences and found many of them have brains prone to something called REM intrusion. That's when the dream state of sleep leaks into waking consciousness.
His theory? The tunnel, the light, the sense of floating, these may be the dying brain slipping into a REM-like state, the same state that produces dreams at the exact moment consciousness is most vulnerable. And then there's the oxygen question. As the brain is starved of oxygen, the visual cortex is affected in a specific pattern, starting from the outer edges and closing inward. Some researchers argue this alone could produce the tunnel effect, a shrinking field of vision with light concentrated in the center.
There's even a chemical theory. Psychiatrist Rick Strassman proposed that the brain releases a surge of a naturally occurring compound called DMT in moments of extreme stress. The same compound found in certain psychedelic plants, known for producing vivid tunnel and light experiences in controlled studies. It's a controversial theory and far from proven, but it's part of the ongoing search for a biological explanation. So, which explanation is correct? Honestly, scientists don't agree. Van Lommel leans toward the idea that consciousness may not be fully explained by brain activity alone. Other researchers, like psychologist Susan Blackmore, argue every element of the experience can be traced back to a dying brain, and nothing more.
This is still an open question in neuroscience, not a settled one. But here's what almost everyone agrees on, regardless of which theory they lean toward. The experience itself changes people. Long-term studies tracking NDE survivors find they often become less afraid of death, more focused on relationships over possessions, and more likely to describe a shift in what they find meaningful. Some studies have tracked survivors for decades afterward, and the personality shift tends to hold. It isn't a passing feeling that fades in a few weeks. For many, it becomes the defining moment of their entire life, more vivid in memory than their wedding day or the birth of their children.
Whether the tunnel is a glimpse of something beyond or the last fireworks of a dying brain, the effect on the people who go through it is real either way. Honestly, what strikes me most isn't the tunnel or the light. It's that people from completely different corners of the world who were taught completely different things about death come back describing almost the same thing. Maybe that says less about what happens after we die and more about what all of our brains have in common, right at the edge. Next time you think about what death might feel like, remember, the closest thing we have to an answer isn't coming from any one religion.
It's coming from brains all over the world, doing something eerily similar in their final moments, and somehow finding their way back to tell us about it.